What is up, guys, and welcome to the Nourish with Renata podcast. Now, as you guys know, especially if you've been following me on my Instagram or you've been listening to the podcast for a while, is that I love to talk about hormones and I love to talk about nutrition. But what I haven't really shared much about is why these things are so important to me. And that is because of my own personal hormone journey. So today I wanted to share with you a little bit about why I really dived headfirst into nutrition and hormones, why it's so important for my health journey, but also so important for me to share it with you because I've literally seen the benefits of when I have figured out how to balance my own hormones through the use of nutrition and powerful holistic methods. It has truly changed my life. So, rewinding back to when I was about 18 years old, this is when I started using contraceptive birth control or oral birth control. It is the hormonal kind, and it is something that I was actually on for years, decades. When I started to want to have kids with my husband, that was the only times that I went off of birth control. But really, ultimately, I used birth control for decades of my life. And really, during the most pivotal times of a woman's fertile life or reproductive life. So, roughly from my 20s all the way to when I was about 38 years old. So, a really long time. What was really interesting was that I didn't really have a good grasp or understanding of the side effects of birth control. And this is one of the things that I wish I had known when I was younger, because ultimately the reason why I started on birth control was just to prevent pregnancy. But I wasn't aware of what the potential long-term results could be in regards to my health, in regards to my hormones from being on birth control for so long. So, like I mentioned, I had been on birth control for a really long time, and it was really in my 30s after I started having kids and was starting to want to, go back to having a regular cycle and not necessarily have any more kids, or so I thought, that I started to notice things like my periods were getting really troublesome or problematic. I was having really heavy periods. And by heavy, I mean I was bleeding through period products in like an hour or two. My cramping was getting worse. And to top that all off, I actually found that no matter what kind of oral contraceptive I was taking, I was having breakthrough bleeding. So I was bleeding or spotting at times when I wouldn't, well, really when I shouldn't have been, according to the pill structure that I was on, which is basically where there is 1 week of basically pills that are sugar pills. And that is supposed to help to instigate your quote unquote period. And the other 3 weeks of the month, you should be on the active pills, which contain the hormones. And that is supposed to stop any kind of quote unquote period occurring. Now, for me, because I was having breakthrough bleeding, I would start getting spotting or greater than spotting at least a week to 2 weeks prior to my quote unquote period starting. And I didn't understand why. I didn't have a good grasp of what birth control is doing to your body, truthfully, when it comes to your hormones. I didn't have a good understanding of the repercussions of the long-term use of birth control, which was really feeding into why I was having all this spotting as well. So ultimately, what happened was I just kept living with it. I kept living with this idea like, I'm just going to be spotting for basically at least 2 weeks prior to my period starting, and basically only having a week of the month where I don't have some kind of bleeding occurring. And this got incredibly disheartening because it was basically like I couldn't wear things like white pants or a white skirt because I was afraid that at any time I could start spotting. And at that time, I was also using panty liners, pads, tampons, and just kept burning through them, using them so much because I kept having so much bleeding. And in addition to that, I had other symptoms, like I had mentioned, the heavy periods, the cramping. I would have like wild swings in emotions, in mood, and energy levels, and I didn't understand why. So, what happened for me was I started to look a little bit more into the long term effects of birth control usage. And I started to look on PubMed, which is basically an online journal resource where you can type in specific keywords and it will pull up whatever information that you're looking for. And in my case, I started to look at the long-term effect of birth control, and specifically because I'd also started to, get abnormal pap smears a couple of times where they had to do, various interventions. And during my research, I happened to find that women that were on birth control for decades, such as myself, actually had a higher risk of things like cervical polyps or cancerous tumors, things like that. And I did not know that. I had not known that for the decades that I had been on birth control, and I was shocked to hear it. So for me, I put two and two together. I was having these cervical polyps, I was having these interventions being done, and I was still on birth control that honestly wasn't really helping because, yes, I mean, technically I wasn't getting pregnant at the time, but also I was having so much breakthrough bleeding. It was really causing me to have a lot of emotional and mental suffering. So, after doing a ton of research and after talking to my husband, we did come to the decision that I was not going to continue with hormonal birth control, oral contraceptives again. I ended up going to my doctor. I knew that I had this kind of gynecological appointment coming up. And so I had armed myself with all of this research, all of the reasons why I wanted to go off of birth control, mostly because I had read on online forums and things like that how much other women had been basically made to feel like they needed to be on birth control whenever they went to their doctor saying they wanted to come off of it. So I wanted to have the evidence behind me, the research behind me before I went to the doctor so that I would be able to tell her, hey, these are the reasons why I don't want to be on birth control anymore. And thankfully, my particular doctor was so open and open and received my opinion and thoughts on stopping birth control. She did say, as you should, like obviously, if you're stopping birth control, then the main reason behind using birth control is to prevent pregnancy. So the possibility of pregnancy is there, which I understood. But she was very open and she understood why I wanted to stop it and knew that ultimately it was my decision and not hers. So I was really grateful for that, especially because I had heard so many women feel like they did not have that really listening ear from their doctor at the particular time when they said they wanted to go off of birth control. So roughly when I was about 38, maybe a little bit earlier, I forget exactly the year, I stopped birth control. And for me, it was like flicking on a light switch. I felt like I was so much clearer. I felt like I knew myself better. I felt like I'd come out of a fog and I could see in technicolor. It was amazing how my energy levels lifted. My mood was more stable. My energy was just like off the charts because I felt so good and so joyful. My relationship with my husband was better because I, had a libido again instead of not having a libido. And it wasn't until later that I really found out that what birth control was truly doing is because of those synthetic hormones that are being put into your body then is not producing the sex hormones at the levels that it usually would without birth control. And so because I'd been on birth control for so many years, what happened was I was basically being put into an early menopause type situation, which is why I had many of those symptoms, especially the mood and energy ones, but also I had no libido at all. And as you can imagine, in a marriage, that can be really trying, but I didn't understand why. And it wasn't until I'd stopped birth control and finally understood what was happening when you're on birth control that I was able to really see how much the birth control was affecting me. But it was a gradual process of having taken the birth control for so long. That's why it was such a stark difference when I'd stopped it, because I could really see how my hormones were coming alive again, why I was able to have better energy, have better mood, have better periods. Like, to be honest, my period started off kind of heavy after I finished birth control, but then it managed to balance itself out. So it wasn't super heavy. It didn't, I stopped all the breakthrough bleeding, which was amazing. So I didn't have any spotting prior to my period and any spotting after my period ended. It was clear cut. And for me, that was a huge sigh of relief because I literally thought because I was spotting so much that there was something wrong, that I was sick, like I had cervical cancer or something like that. So I was so glad to see that when I stopped birth control, those things ended. So I had so many positive benefits from stopping birth control. And that's just my own journey. And I didn't realize, like I mentioned, I didn't realize at the time how much birth control was affecting my hormones. And it wasn't until later when I stopped that I started to do a huge deep dive into women's hormones. Women's hormones, into women's nutrition, and how they are actually connected. And that's why I was having such a positive experience from stopping birth control, because I was actually focused a lot on what nutrients I was putting into my body. making sure I had all the key nutrients to make sure that when I stopped birth control, I wouldn't have any adverse side effects. So I was making sure I had plenty of vitamin Bs. These are the ones that can often get depleted when you're on birth control for so long. Making sure I had lots of magnesium rich foods, which can also be another nutrient that your body doesn't have enough of when you're on birth control for so long. And there's so many other key nutrients that our bodies truly need, but just don't get absorbed well into the body when you're on birth control for so long. So I use the power of food to really help re-nourish my body so that I would have a positive experience coming off of birth control and really be able to naturally balance my hormones. So that's just a little bit about my story, why coming off of birth control was so important for me, why I had such a positive experience coming off of it, noting all my symptoms before and how all those symptoms were alleviated after coming off of birth control. And also why food is one of the most amazing things that we can literally choose every single day in order to be able to create harmony in our bodies, in order to be able to balance our hormones naturally. It's so, so powerful. And you might be able to hear next to me, I have a baby now. So at 40 years old, I actually became pregnant, which was amazing. And he's sitting next to me, which is really incredible. So, so many amazing things happened once I came off of birth control. And I'm just going to end the episode here in just a second. Oh, he's crying. But what I wanted to say is the reason why, hey, bud. Oh, there you go. Oh, oh, mm. There we go. Okay. So this is our new little baby. This is Nolan. He's our fourth child. And truly, I believe he is our miracle baby because of, when we started to want to have kids, it was really challenging for us. And so we really feel honored and blessed to be able to have a baby, for me to be able to have a healthy pregnancy when I'm 40 years old. And that's just a portion of my hormone balancing journey and the amazing things that can occur when you learn how to balance your hormones naturally, which is why I'm going to be hosting a masterclass in September called How to Balance Your Hormones Without Meds. And this is going to be talking all about how to literally use food and holistic practices to help to balance your hormones, specifically if you have conditions such as PCOS, if you have heavy periods, if you have estrogen dominance or low progesterone, if you're in perimenopause. These are all the things that we're going to be talking about in terms of how food can be a really powerful way of helping to heal your body. So make sure to check out the notes below in order to sign up for this masterclass. And I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Here's to your health and happiness, and we'll see you in the next episode.